Welcome to Critical Junction, episode 56. I'm Mark.
Oh, hi, I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
And around 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, 1912, the White Star Line's famed new passenger ship RMS Titanic struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic Ocean and sank in the early morning of April 15th, 4 days into her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. In total, more than 1,500 people were killed, making it one of history's deadliest and most well-known maritime disasters during peacetime. The events surrounding the sinking of RMS Titanic are so well known, in fact, that James Cameron even directed a classic 100% true documentary about it in 1997, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, which featured Celine Dion's popular theme to late 90s high school proms everywhere, My Heart Will Go On. That the ship sank in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic is so widely accepted as fact due to the overwhelming amount of supporting evidence that only an idiot could ever believe it never happened. Just like how only an idiot could ever believe humans never landed on the moon or that the Earth is flat. Well, thanks to the wonders of the internet, even the wildest, most idiotic ideas can be widely circulated, like the one conspiracy theory that claims Titanic never actually sank. Cue dramatic music. According to the conspiracy theory, simply put, Titanic failed to live up to her expectations as the marvel of technical engineering that the White Star Line had promised, so they swapped ships for her maiden voyage, and the ship billed as the mighty Titanic was in fact an older White Star Line vessel, the predecessor and sister ship of Titanic, RMS Olympic. To take it a step further, the theory also suggests the entire crash was an insurance scam gone horribly awry. And what kind of evidence do proponents of the conspiracy theory put forth to back it up? What unshakable, demonstrable proof did they bring to the table that can prove history wrong? Nothing! None whatsoever. Only wild-ass speculation and conjecture that has no basis at all in reality. Normally, this would be the point where I ask why anyone could possibly believe this shit, but we've answered that question numerous times during the ship. We've answered that question numerous times during previous similar episodes. Proponents of this conspiracy theory, like any other, feel like they're totes woke AF and are part of an in-group that knows something that the general public doesn't. But until and unless there is sufficient demonstrable, independently verifiable evidence to support these crazy alternative facts, there's fuck all reason to believe them. So let's wade waist deep into the bullshit waters of the insane corner of the internet and spend an hour picking this thing apart. I don't really know how far we'll get because, to be honest, we only found out about this thing a couple of days ago, but let's talk about that anyway, shall we?
Well, let's just say right off the bat, I'm one of these idiots that totally believes it, 100%.
You're totes woke AF?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Totes woke AF.
No, I don't actually believe it. But I was surprised at how deep this rabbit hole went.
Yeah, so, superficially, the one I was describing is the conspiracy theory that we found, just randomly, the other day. But after doing a little bit of digging in the day and a half that we had to put the show together, I found a bunch of others.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
There's more than just the insurance scam one.
There's the insurance scam one. There's the one that says J.P. Morgan planned the disaster to kill his rivals.
Right, yeah. So I noticed that a few different aspects were kind of woven into the conspiracy that I was first reading about from what you had sent us.
So we've got motive.
We've got motive.
Two motives.
Motive means an opportunity.
So
Case closed.
We've got those. We also have another one that says a mummy's curse doomed the Titanic.
Right.
Oh, mummy's curse. Wow.
Yeah.
There's one that says the ship's number reads quote unquote no pope backwards. So
what?
That's one of them.
The ship's number reads no pope?
Yes. Do you want to
isn't the ship's number that 401 thing that's stamped on all of the...
Yeah. So it's just bullshit.
Wait, so
it
doesn't look like no pope?
No.
Like someone's just saying something.
So somebody just said that, and then a bunch of other people went, "We've got a conspiracy."
Yeah, well, see, I don't know how it started, but...
That's so weird.
At some point, somebody made the claim that the ship's hull number was 390904. So if you mirror that, it looks like no pope. Except the ship's hull number was, in fact, 401 from the very beginning.
So we could just be going, the Titanic was pink, like bright pink.
Why not?
That's the conspiracy.
That's the new conspiracy.
We're
adding some more
details.
details.
I think one of the other conspiracy ideas that I was hearing, or one of the other supposed pieces of evidence, is that at one point the Olympic had been painted white to show up better in photos when it was going out for its maiden voyage, I think. And in the photos from under the sea, from when they first found the Titanic, where the paint is kind of worn away or eaten away by rust and stuff like that, you get to see some of the undercoating, and it looks like there's white paint in the undercoat when the Titanic was never painted white. So, da, da, da.
Could it be a primer maybe that all ships have? Could that be a possibility?
Could it not even be white paint there?
Could it just be like?
Could it just be completely invented, like 401 equaling no pope?
Oh, where do we start? Which one of these crazy nonsense conspiracy theories
Jesus
do we want
Christ.
to start
Well, how about the most possible? How about that?
Okay.
So none. We're not starting with any of them.
Well, one that sheds lights on the possibility that we could even consider it. Like, what can we consider here?
From what I was seeing, like the most the most kind of discussed or persistent of the theories was just the one that that it was an insurance scam, and J.P. Morgan Chase, along with the guy who runs the White Star Line, had concocted this plan to switch the ship's identities within a weekend.
Right. Good luck doing that.
Switch the ship's identities within a weekend, pay off a bunch of workers who were supposedly on strike, a bunch of coal shovelers and stuff like that. Pay them off to go on this trip and keep their mouths shut about the switching of the identities of the ship, and to arrange for the SS California. I think it was it the SS California or I don't know, some ship called the California,
right,
to meet them in the Atlantic, and just be there so that they could fake crash the ship and just evacuate the ship in the middle of the Atlantic, and then make it sink on its own.
So how many people would have been involved in that kind of massive cover up? Because that's a fuck ton of people.
Well, first of all, you've got the 2,000 people that are just passengers,
right,
on the ship. Then you've got all of the workers that would have been needed to sort of update the two ships to switch their identities. You know, they have to for things from changing the moniker on the side of the ship to switching out the stationery inside,
and all the dishes, and
all the dishes,
bells.
the ship's bells, the plaques that are on all of the lifeboats. There's plaques that identify what. And they
supposedly did this during a weekend.
A weekend, yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't have taken much more than a weekend.
Oh, I totally buy it.
Yeah.
Well, see, the insurance thing makes the least amount of sense, because the amount of money that Olympic was insured for would not cover the sinking of the Titanic.
So yeah, that's the funny thing. The Titanic, which was the newer ship, was insured and probably better insured than the Olympic at this stage, just because
it was an older ship.
It wasn't much older, but it had been through a few kind of disasters.
Yeah, she had an accident at one point on one of her
couple of accidents.
Yeah, a couple of accidents.
But the major one was with the British Navy ship.
Yeah, the one that rammed it.
Put two huge gashes in the side of it, one above the waterline and one below, because this was like an old 19th century ship that was made for ramming. Mm-hmm. It was a battleship
so
made for ramming.
It did its job, basically.
Yeah. And essentially what happened is I think the Olympic was coming out of harbor, and this thing was coming in, and as they were passing, the Olympic's displacement, water displacement, because it's such a huge ship, sucked the other ship's nose right into the backside of it. Huh. And so
I heard it was more of a traffic collision. Like they saw each other coming. Olympic made a turn too late, and then the other ship. No, okay,
no, that might have been one of the other ones, but on the few different sources that I was looking about that story,
okay,
it was about the water displacement actually sucking the other ship into it.
Jesus Christ.
And so that's why the British Navy did an investigation and found themselves to be absolved of all liability in the accident, even though they're the ones that rammed into this other ship with a ramming ship. But anyway, they found themselves to be free of all liability, and they declared that the White Star Line and the Olympic were on the hook for all of the court costs, the costs of repairing the ship, both ships, and basically all of the costs were on White Star's back at this point. So I imagine that would have impacted the insurance on the Olympic.
We're gonna have to jack your bill.
And when they made the Titanic and they had the Titanic insured, for some reason they were only able to get 2/3 of the cost of the ship insured. So it cost them £7.5 million, I think, to build the Titanic, and it was insured for $5 million.
Yeah.
So this insurance scam was to claim a loss still, which is absurd.
It falls apart.
It totally falls apart when you know that. And one of the documentaries that I watched playing up this conspiracy theory was totally misrepresenting the numbers and inflating the numbers. They said something like over £12 million was what it was insured for. Oh, they said that they had upped the insurance right before the accident. You know that classic cliche story of
like 9/11
of an insurance scam. Yeah, just like the 9/11 conspiracy theory, which I'm sure the same people believe the same thing.
Probably. So there's that.
Yeah. So that's
that. This has been Critical Junction episode. So yeah, that one's the easiest to debunk just right away with that one number. So fuck it. That one's taken care of.
Debunking in the sense that it doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't make sense that they would scuttle a $7.5 million ship to claim
they'd be dumping
a £2.5 million loss.
But the Titanic would still exist. If they were using another ship.
if they let's say they didn't do this this plan to scuttle one of the ships and claim the insurance money, if they hadn't done it, they would have had 2 operational ships continue to operate and make the money that they invested to build them in the first place.
Right.
But instead, what they did is they had one operational ship that had some problems with it, and they decided to build a second one at a cost of £7.5 million, only to shove that into the ocean,
tank it,
and claim £5 million, meaning that their big plan was to lose $2.5 million.
Oh, hold on, you're talking about the cost of the Titanic, but the Titanic would still exist. The other one would be the one that the
Olympic would
have. The Olympic is the one they're tanking.
In a conspiracy,
right?
But
in reality, it would have been a loss. So it just doesn't make sense for them to have swapped ships at all.
No.
Well, how much did the Olympic cost to make?
I have no idea, but I imagine it would have been close to the same amount because the two ships were virtually identical.
They're of the same class.
The Olympic basically became a class of its own.
Yeah.
The Olympic class.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were 3 ships of the class.
Which is really small by today's standards of ship, right?
Yeah.
It's
compared to modern cruise ships, it's smaller.
I'm pretty sure they're bigger than like a regular.
The Olympic class, they're still huge. They're still massive ships. But I'm just saying, like modern cruise ships.
What is one of those
colossal? Like they're
what are one of those
massively
those big name Caribbean cruise ships?
Like the like Sunwing and all those guys.
Yeah,
not Sunwing.
The Princess.
The Princess. Yeah, they're all called the Princess, right?
Yeah, those giant ocean cruisers.
Well, like for example, the one that ran aground in Italy.
Yeah.
You know, I think the Olympic and the Titanic were like ships that are like twice as big as that one. Still,
Maybe I don't know.
I think it would be small compared to
You
a
think
cruise
so?
ship. Yeah, I think so.
Well, yeah,
they're
modern
talking
cruise ships are
about
just fucking enormous.
they're talking about rebuilding
guess so.
a replica of the Titanic,
Yeah.
and then people can go on
Yeah, they're going to
vacation.
sail it along the same line.
But when you look at what it looks like
Yeah, the
inside,
Titanic too.
yeah, it's going to sail the same
small
course as
in
the original.
comparison. It will not be comfortable compared to today's cruise ships. You know,
Yeah. It wouldn't be comfortable compared to
I don't think so. It'll probably be very claustrophobic compared to what cruise ships
Well,
are.
like it's still.
I mean,
it's
they
still
were
a big
luxury
ship.
liners, right? And
Well, luxury has changed. Luxury is
Yeah.
all the more luxurious. Like, I mean, we're wiping our asses with the boreal forest there these days. Like, we are comfortable. You know,
that's true. Yeah.
That's true. So okay, there's that one, which makes no sense. There's also the one that says J.P. Morgan planned the disaster to kill his rivals.
Yeah, to kill off like a bunch of rich people. That,
Yeah. So I'm getting this from history.com, by the way, so anyone can look it up. I'm just going to read the little intro paragraph. So according to this theory, millionaire banker J.P. Morgan planned the Titanic disaster to kill off rival millionaires Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim, who all perished aboard.
Uh-huh.
How? How? Like, he would have had to have foresight that the ship was going to sink or sink it himself somehow.
Yeah.
They don't, the theory does not explain how that would have happened.
Well, this is the main nature of the conspiracy theory to begin with, right? Wasn't it that J.P. Morgan J.P. Morgan, that J.P. Morgan had conspired with the White Star Line guy?
No, this one's separate. Like, there's the insurance scam thing we just talked about, where he conspired with the White Star executive.
Oh, so they think that he did this.
Yeah.
That this is a
This is
different
completely
conspiracy where it didn't involve a conspiracy other than J.P.
Killing-
Morgan
yeah.
just choosing
Yeah.
to somehow
he's often some rich people at the
to
expense of a
somehow
bunch of...
divine
See, that's
an
what
iceberg into the ship as it was going across the
Yeah, like,
Atlantic on its maiden
it
voyage.
hinges on the fact that Morgan originally planned to be on the maiden voyage of Titanic, and then at the last minute changed his mind, leaving the 3 other billionaires on board who died in the crash.
Yeah.
So, like, he planned that. Well, how did he? Can you tell me how he planned that? No, but he did.
Well, I keep on thinking that the further back we go in history, the less, clearly documented things are. You know, like, it becomes more and more difficult to prove or disprove something really.
Yeah.
I mean, what do we have to go on that we could consider hard science, for example?
Well,
you
okay.
know?
Well, the thing is, though, it's the burden of proof falls on the one making the claim. So in this case, the claim is that Morgan killed all these people. So
okay,
it's up
sure.
to them to prove it. What
But
evidence can you bring to the table to
What
prove
I'm
that
getting at is,
assertion?
though, do we also have that same burden of proof that we can place on what is considered the reality of the event?
If
And how much verifiable, concrete science do we
Well,
have
see,
of
that's
even that?
It's
right?
not even a matter of concrete science. It's that there's independently verifiable and corroborating evidence to support the historical narrative of what happened. Right? It's not just one or two things. It's a bunch of other things that are tied into it that can all validate the official account. Right? And that's how we go about determining what happened during history. It's not
I
just...
mean, we just happen to be lucky that every single one of the claims of evidence for these conspiracy theories are pretty much verifiably invalidated. Like the idea that J.P. Morgan canceled at the last minute. He first of all, the guy lived in Europe. He wasn't living in America.
Right.
And between something like 1904 and 1911, he had gone to America twice in like nearly 10 years. And there is a telegram or letter that he actually sent like a week or a couple weeks before the launch of the Titanic, saying that he was going to be at some kind of event in Italy, literally a week or two after the Titanic's launch. Which means that it would have been impossible for him to take the week's voyage to North America and then the week's voyage back to make it in time for this event.
Yeah.
So unfortunately for these conspiracy theorists, we just happen to have some concrete evidence that it's
That is
unlikely.
not that. Right.
And first of all, why would he want to like? It's an investment, right, to get across the pond at that time. So why would you want to make just an immediate return trip just for the maiden voyage thing? Like you would think if you're gonna plan to be part of the maiden voyage, you're also gonna plan to make it worthwhile to have taken a week to go to the States. You would have arranged to do stuff while you're in the States, right?
Right.
But no, there's nothing like that.
Yeah, so, we have his official account of why he changed his mind, like you said, Joel. And the other side...
Well, they also said something about him claiming that he was sick, and him being spotted a couple days later at on the Rive Sud there of France,
right.
there, with his mistress or something.
Yeah. So this theory, it just claims that the reason why he wanted to kill these three other dudes is because they opposed the creation of the Federal Reserve, even though two of the three don't appear to have taken a position on it whatsoever. So, it's just this. I don't know how these things come about.
Yeah.
Did someone at some point just, it's like, where does it come from? How do people come up with these bullshit ideas, and how do they keep propagating? That's what. It's just fascinating.
Well, I would think that the mistrust in where information is coming from will only grow bigger and bigger. Like the pile of garbage will only get bigger and bigger, to the point where I think of that that Baudrillard guy there about the simulacrum or whatever it's called. I'm not exactly sure how to
simulacrum.
pronounce it. How eventually reality does not even resemble reality anymore. And I feel that is what's occurring. When we look at the history, we have to look at who's documenting this history. Do we trust them? We have to take all these things into account. And at this point in history, there is no... back in the day, we used to be able to go, well, do we trust these politicians? Now we look at politicians and go, well, we just can't possibly even fathom being able to trust you anymore, There is evidence
we aren't doing that. Half of the United States does trust the highest politician in the land implicitly. They trust him absolutely just cause he sticks it to the libs.
Right.
Or they trust implicitly Putin, who fucking annexes countries next to him and has a history with the FSB. And,
Right.
Or the former KGB.
What I'm getting at is, though, that we're always relying on something from the past to make some sort of a recording that we can then turn to. And so we can't... I don't know. There is... I can understand why there's a mistrust. I can understand why...
Like a mistrust of the official account?
Well, a mistrust in general of everything. Things seem to be becoming more and more corrupt. I don't know if that's the case, but it would seem to be the case.
Yeah, I think that's a complete illusion. I think that's sort of
it could very well be. But what I'm saying is
that's sort of like a variation on the idea that there's an ideal past to hearken back to. That
the good old days.
The whole good old days fallacy. Like that everything was better in the 1950s. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Back when segregation was still explicitly a policy.
Yeah,
overt racism.
I feel like you're talking about a zeitgeist of a time kind of thing, and how it was just things were more black and white, and so therefore more palatably graspable.
Not quite. I'm talking about people who just literally believe that it was generally a better time before, and that things now are deteriorating and we're heading to the end of the world kind of thing.
And they glorify that false image of how things used to be perfect in the past. Yeah. And why don't we go back to the good old days?
If you look at people like Steven Pinker and his very thorough sort of cataloging of statistical trends in terms of economic comfort, violence, war, all this kind of stuff. He tracks a lot of statistical evidence that shows that things like violent crime and deaths by war and disease are all on the decline.
Yeah, like according
are all
to
trending towards a decline when
Right.
the common sense idea is that things are getting worse.
yeah, like
Right.
Pinker's meta-analysis suggests that we're living in the best possible time at the moment. You know,
There's always been a sense, I guess, that it sorry to cut you off, but what I have to say is more important. But,
naturally.
but now I don't remember. It was one of those thoughts, it was so good.
Yeah.
I can't keep it.
Oh shit!
That wasn't mine
That's so
to
fleeting.
have. So fleeting.
Go on.
Being right is so fleeting.
Yeah. You gotta
Uh,
seize it.
It's funny though that I guess the contrast is that we have no mental faculties to hold on to it, even if it is getting better. We have no perspective on that. It's all relative, right?
Well, I think you can make the argument that it's not just our perception of it. Like if we go according to the statistics, then you have an actual solid piece of evidence that indicates that things are in fact getting better. And it's not just perception about it, right?
But so we can say that yes, in a sense, you're saying the critical mind can make this evaluation.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the loss of the critical mind. The more we document things, the less we're actually using our real faculties in the moment to make judgments, to analyze. Yeah.
I think that's right as a last step of the process, where you're just distributing the information to the laity and they're just absorbing it and just passively taking in that analysis.
And then they're subjected to information overload.
Right, yeah. But
Desensitization.
the process of compiling that information is when the critical mind is able to just openly analyze what's going on. And I think the last step of the process should also be similar to that. We shouldn't stop being critical about the information once we get to the final analysis of it. Like, okay, well, what was the methodology you used to put all this shit together? And just keep asking those questions, right? Otherwise, you become a passive observer and you just get lost in this information overload.
Yeah. Eventually unable to follow it. Like, in a sense, the more exact our accumulation of knowledge becomes, the less able the layman is to even follow it, and so therefore grasp it. It's kind of funny.
So next, that was awesome. A Mummy's Curse doomed the Titanic.
Yeah, I like that one.
This one's
I'm always doomed? What?
a mummy's curse.
Oh, a mummy's curse.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
So the theory goes that
This
they
is
were
like coming right out of like 50s movie. Like,
yeah.
It's
This
right
would make
out of
this would
the
make an
Curse of the
amazing
Mummy.
movie. So let's see here. I'm just gonna read it because this is complicated and I don't want to
Apparently it's like the mummy or a statue of Amun-Ra,
I don't know if-
an Egyptian queen or princess.
Well, I'll just get into it. So, one of the passengers who went down with the Titanic was William Stead, or Steed. I don't really know how to pronounce it because I've never heard it pronounced. But a British editor who subscribed to early 20th century spiritualism and spent several years claiming a cursed mummy was causing mysterious destruction and disaster in London. So, on board the Titanic, Stead happily repeated his tale of the mummy's curse to other passengers. After the ship sank, a survivor recounted Stead's story to the New York World, and the media picked it up. The next month, the Washington Post ran this headline: "Ghost of Titanic, Vengeance of Hoodoo Mummy Followed Man Who Wrote Its History." So the basic story is that the Titanic was carrying this sarcophagus on the bridge of the ship so that it wouldn't get water damage down below or whatever.
Right.
And when it this mummy being taken away from Egypt is what caused the ship to sink.
Right. What I like is how you can trace the evolution of the story there, of the myth that was built there. It starts off just that one of the scholars related to the.
Oh, sorry, minor correction. So they weren't transporting it from Egypt; they were taking it from the British Museum to an American who bought it.
Sure.
Sorry.
So that's what the story became. But at the beginning, it was just about some guy telling the story of the mythology of the cursed the
Curse of London
relics, and this guy being a passenger.
Right.
And then that morphs in the whole conspiracy theory to the idea that there was a mummy on the ship, or
Right.
And the funny thing about this whole thing is that sarcophagus, they actually still have it, so they know it wasn't on the ship.
It's still in the, like today. It's still in the,
you can go visit it right now.
It's sitting at the British
Well,
Museum
that ruins
right
that
now.
one. I can't use
Right,
that one.
totally, yeah.
Okay, well that one's out the window then, I guess.
It's out the window, but it's still believed as part of the conspiracy by a lot of people who believe
Maybe
the
they
Titanic conspiracy.
totally swapped mummies. The one on the ship was like the one in the museum is not the real mummy. It went down with the Titanic. Even
I
though
do
they
love
never
the fact
found
that if the
it.
mummy didn't exist in the first place, it would be more possible somehow.
Yeah, right. Because you wouldn't have
because there's
to
nothing
verify it.
concrete to back it up, right?
Yeah.
But so this would make a really fun B movie to check
totally.
out. The Curse of the Mummy or Titanic Mummy or whatever. I'll figure out a title later, but so that like you can go to the British Museum today and locate the mummy that this conspiracy theory is talking about.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing to it. Shall we waste more time talking about it, or shall we move on?
Let's move on to another one if we have any more Titanic.
There are other aspects of it. So let's see. Oh, the propeller thing.
Tell us about the propeller thing.
Okay,
Tell us,
this
Jill.
one is really kind of.
You like this one?
It's kind of confused. It's hard to follow.
Okay.
What the logic of the
best.
conspiracists is. So apparently, in one of the accidents of the Olympic, its propeller was damaged.
Okay.
And so it had to get its propeller replaced, and the claim is that they used one of the Titanic's propellers and put that onto the starboard missing propeller for the Olympic.
Okay.
So that means that the Olympic has a
Titanic propeller.
A Titanic propeller with the 401, the Titanic's number.
No Pope. Yeah.
No Pope.
Ship number, no Pope, stamped on it.
Hashtag no Pope.
So, since they found the Titanic and they took pictures of the Titanic underwater, and you can actually see that starboard propeller with the Titanic number 401 on it, that's proof that it's actually the Olympic, because the Olympic is the one that should have
What?
the 401 number on it. Whereas the Titanic would also have the number 401
that's what I
on
was
it,
gonna
because
say,
the
like the
Titanic
number's
didn't
not
get
anywhere
the
else.
Titanic didn't in turn get the damaged.
They didn't swap
They
propellers.
didn't swap propellers, first of all. But the other thing is that propellers are actually specific to each ship, not only because of the stamp on it, but because of
The design of the ship.
actual like pitch of the
Right.
propeller blades and stuff like that, right?
Not so interchangeable.
They're not interchangeable. And if you were just to put one from another ship on one side of it,
It would
then
crash.
the thing would be it would
be going in
crash.
circles.
Oh, maybe that's why the Titanic sank.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It would spin
It
in
would be
circles
spin in
because
circles,
like
that's
the
It must be the propeller, Captain.
Yeah, so the conspiracy, is that they had put the Titanic's propeller on the Olympic, and that's proof that
so because
since we can see that number 401 propeller at the bottom of the Atlantic right
Hashtag
now,
no Pope.
that's proof.
So-
Hashtag no Pope.
because we see the actual propeller that belongs to the actual ship that it was supposed to be built for
Yeah.
is proof that it isn't.
Pretty much. So the other funny thing is that they make extra propellers. It's not like they just make two propellers for each.
They have spares
or three
in
propellers.
case of some kind of like
They
disaster.
have spares, and when the Titanic needed a replacement of propellers, they had extra Titanic propellers to put on it, and it would be the same thing with the Olympic. If they needed to replace the Olympic's propeller, they would just cast a new propeller for the Olympic with the proper pitch and everything on it, and it would have to be stamped 400 so that you knew what pitch and stuff, so that you knew that it was the proper propeller for that ship.
Right.
Because they're not interchangeable. That's why they get stamped.
It's not like swapping a sail, you know?
No, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah. That's
All right.
a fun one.
Fuck off.
Well, it sounds like it's an example of someone creating a conspiracy theory with bad science. Like there's still a science. It's just
reasoning.
bad science.
It's really bad reasoning. Like that.
Yeah.
It just. I can't. I'm trying so hard to wrap my head around this. What I just said, like the fact that it's the right one proves that it isn't. That's just.
But it is an example of a reasoning that's just not as good as.
Oh, it's really bad.
It's bad. But I guess the idea that I'm putting out there is that it's like science is always being used. It's just being used badly. And so it's always dependent on our documentation of things and relying and backtracking. And you know, I mean, how reliable is each step of the way? And so this is what I'm saying. Like, in a sense, the more intelligent we become, the less easy it is to follow. Like, and so people are left by the wayside, and who's following it but a very specific person that we then have to trust.
That's one of my favorite sort of social psychology heuristics or psychology heuristics that I learned about, was that you actually get better at rationalizing fallacies and bad thinking the more intelligent you are, or the more educated you are, even.
Like the more you practice your critical reasoning skills, the more you're able to rationalize your bad reasoning.
Yeah. It's like
and if you're missing a single piece of the puzzle, everything goes askew. Yeah. Like as soon as there's a misreality there, everything is fucked.
The key to that, the way out of that, is being able to admit you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just, they're not, they just don't have that capacity.
So the ego
it's like in the practice of science, you know, the appreciation of the phrase "I don't know" or "we don't know."
Mm-hmm.
You know, inconclusive or "I don't know"
needs further research.
is almost a preferred outcome, because that prompts them to get to do more fun researching. Right.
The more intelligent you are, the more open you are to claiming "I don't know."
No, the scientific method.
No,
the scientific method.
I just like hearing that.
Teaches
totally
"I don't know" as an important answer to be able to give.
Right.
And it's important not to claim something other than that answer when it's not valid to do so. Like to claim certainty in one way or the other when you don't actually have sufficient evidence to claim that.
Right.
Yeah, the scientific method never claims certainty on a position.
Right.
Like, it just says this is the more likely model that explains observable fact A. You know?
Yeah. So there's a and what we were saying was that there's a psychology heuristic, or like a bug in our psychology that makes it so that when we're more educated on critical reasoning and stuff like that, then you're better equipped to use those tricks to kind of rationalize away problems with your reasoning.
I like the idea that your attachment has to be to critical reasoning, not to the thing that you're using critical reasoning to analyze.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you can't be attached to
the
the thing
danger
you're analyzing, but to critical reasoning.
That's
itself.
right, because to be attached to the thing you're arguing for, that's
leaves room for wrongness.
That's presupposing and that's prejudicial. It's inherently fallacious. Yeah. Sophistry. That's what that is. So I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. More. Give me more.
To me, there's a major incoherence to the whole conspiracy right from the get-go. So the idea is that the Olympic was basically worthless because it crashed with the HMS Hawk, and so they wanted to scuttle it for insurance money. That's the basic premise, right?
Right.
So in real life, what happened is the Olympic, in real life, the Olympic went on to operate and make money for the company I mean, you might say that's only because it was actually the new Titanic ship that it was able to do so. But the thing about this is that in real life, what we know to be true is that it went on to operate for decades. So it reveals not only that the Olympic was physically capable of continuing to operate, and I mean, even if you do buy the conspiracy theory, it was capable enough to operate for 4 days, and go across the Atlantic with 2,000 passengers. Anyway, not only was it physically capable of operating, but it also wasn't perceived as worthless because it was allowed to continue to operate and be insured and be used.
Right. Like, it wasn't a junker.
It wasn't a junker, right? Like White Star was able to claim to be using the Olympic despite the fact that it had been involved in a couple of accidents. So it wasn't a write-off. It wasn't something that needed to be scuttled.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so there's an incoherence there. If they did switch the two ships, then what's happened is that the Titanic continued to operate as a brand new ship, and basically the Olympic ended up having a career that it shouldn't have been able to have because it was supposedly scrapped, like it was supposedly not usable and too broken, and like wouldn't that be raising questions? But that's actually not part of the conspiracy.
They just forget that little detail.
They forget that the Olympic actually went on to operate for like 20 years,
something like that.
After the
she had a good career.
Like, she had a good career. It was like in the 30s that it got
yeah.
decommissioned or whatever.
It was a perfectly seaworthy vessel.
And it was commandeered by the military and used in the war and stuff.
As a supply vessel.
As a supply vessel and a transport at some point.
But let's not talk about that. It was swapped. Obviously.
Yeah.
So here's another one. According to this conspiracy theory, the Titanic was sunk not by hitting an iceberg, but after being torpedoed by a German U-boat.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Because apparently some of the survivors heard explosions after the ship began sinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and wouldn't there be explosions
while
a ship breaks in half?
Of course not. No, you're not going to hear breaking metal or explosions
and
anywhere.
Of course they're torpedoing something that's already going down.
Yeah. Like, not to mention the witnesses who actually described the iceberg that the ship hit. But no, it was torpedoed by a U-boat for some reason.
The funny thing about this is that apparently on the ship, like the survivors claimed that no the actual impact with the iceberg, or if it wasn't an iceberg, then maybe a torpedo, let's say, for the sake of argument here, at that impact point, nobody actually noticed.
Right.
There wasn't a big crash and boom, because basically this ship is going like full speed ahead, and it scrapes alongside an iceberg, and that tears a hole through the side of the hull. So it wasn't like there was a impact like that. It was like it
tore through. Yeah,
right, it just sliced into the side of the ship and cut through a bunch of the sort of independently.
And it was well below the waterline too. So
well below the waterline. So if it were a torpedo, you would have heard a boom, or you would have felt a boom. The nature of these two kinds of accidents would have a very different kind of feel. But you don't hear reports of the booms until the ship is already like sinking and things are breaking and
you're
stuff.
Saying that
at the time that this ship was made to start sinking, there's no report of any boom or
right.
crash.
Like, you're basically saying the only people reporting torpedoes are people that know absolutely nothing about torpedoes.
Right.
So they wouldn't know what that's even like.
Yeah.
Right, or they just they weren't aware of the fact that what caused the Titanic to sink was not felt like a torpedo would be felt.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't felt at all.
Right.
Hitting an iceberg.
People thought everything was fine for like 45 minutes.
Right. Until the ship started to list.
How long did it take to sink?
Hours.
Only 2 hours or so, though.
Well, it struck the iceberg at 11:40 on April 14th, and around 5 a.m. the next morning it was sunk.
So when did people start evacuating the ship? Like, how long?
I think that was the 2 hours after the initial impact.
It took 2 hours for them to start going like.
No. I think it for like a half hour nobody was doing anything.
Right.
Like it was as if there was nothing wrong, and then after a half hour into the boat already sinking, that's when they start going, okay, I think we have a problem.
We might have a problem, and still people refuse to believe it.
Yeah.
Right, that's the big...
Because it was the unsinkable...
Yeah, the mighty Titanic, marvel of engineering, can't possibly be going down.
I do think that that when something bad happens, we're generally in shock. Like, we just can't believe it. Like, if we walk outside this door right now, leaving Mark's place, and some guy starts walking at us with a knife, we're not going to react so quickly.
Right,
it's just going to be like a dream. Like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
What is this, guy?
What's
is that a knife?
Yeah,
what's happening here? We'd be putting all these things together, and then we'd be being stabbed. And then we'd be like, is that Jill being stabbed right now? Like, hey,
wait!
I think I was stabbed. What's going on? Yeah.
So, when bad things happen, we're just... we're in such a safe place in our minds, we just can't believe it. You know, when people are dying and suffering and we see how people die and shit, we just can't believe it.
Yeah.
Like,
that's true.
Things are bad, people. Things are way worse than you think.
That's the... If you're going to take anything...
That's my final thought.
Okay. To completely contradict what we were saying earlier in relation to Pinker and all that.
Oh, okay.
Other aspects. What do you think about this whole idea of the California that was meant to meet it? And there was apparently like a third ship in the area between the California and the Titanic that had also sent up a flare or a
warning of the iceberg kind of thing.
Yeah, like they have like fireworks on the ship that are
fireworks. Like icebergs get their own fireworks.
They're flares.
No, not icebergs. The ships.
The icebergs have.
So when a ship is in distress, it'll send up these.
Okay. So there was another
fireworks.
ship in distress,
and there was another ship apparently that had sent up a flare like this, and that's what the California saw, and for some reason didn't react
due to the iceberg.
So part of the conspiracy was that the Titanic has like red, white, and blue fireworks for being in distress, and the conspiracy is that the California was out there to meet it. And it was waiting to see the blue and red flares to then react.
To watch the fireworks.
And then go evacuate the ship and be the rescuing...
Now that the fireworks show's over,
ship for the Titanic,
so that
for the Titanic, which we are supposed to think was actually the Olympic, then they could sink the Olympic in the middle of the ocean and everybody would be carried off on the California.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, one of the interesting thing is the California. So part of the conspiracy with the California is that this thing sailed off just as the strike was ending among the shipyard workers and coal shovelers and stuff like that. There was a strike around that time. But it took off anyway, and it had loads of coal, but no passengers on it. And the cargo that it had was 2,000 sweaters and blankets, which would be like perfect for rescuing people or something.
How convenient.
Yeah, how convenient. The thing is, the California is a ship that can only take about 45 passengers and about 55 crew.
Oh.
So it could not even hold. It could not even hold a sixth of the people who actually were survivors of the Titanic.
Didn't they also just not have enough boats? Like,
Well, that's it. Yeah, the Titanic did not have enough.
It's like it was standard that it just wasn't worked out properly back then.
No, well,
It's 'cause
they
didn't
just
believe it would sink.
didn't believe it would sink. So it was, it was like paying lip service to the idea.
Oh, fine, we'll throw in a couple
Fine,
of
we'll throw in a
lifeboats.
couple of lifeboats. Yeah.
Right.
Which actually leads me to the other thing. About 6 months after the Titanic sinking, the Olympic gets taken back in for upgrades and safety upgrades and stuff like that in light of the Titanic thing. So part of that includes getting a whole bunch of new lifeboats added on, enough to actually save everyone on the boat if there was something happening, and other parts of that is actually upgrading it to make it look more like the Titanic.
Right.
So the thing is, so some of the main differences between the two boats was like the Titanic had a couple of like bigger sort of common rooms on the upper A deck. It also had like a closed-in promenade in the front half of the ship, whereas on the Olympic it's like an open walkway promenade on the I think it's the B deck there. And on the Titanic, they had closed it in so that the people there in those cabins, they wouldn't get like spray or whatever from the ocean. And so the other thing is that this means that the ships are actually identifiable pretty easily. Like you can see the enclosures on the deck on the Titanic.
Okay. Where
that front half of the deck is of the promenade is closed in. So anyway, they took in the Olympic 6 months after the accident in like the fall of that same year to make some upgrades to make it look more like the Titanic did, which implies obviously that it didn't look identical to the Titanic to begin with.
Unless, of course, this is just part of the conspiracy and it already looked like it and they were just saying that they were making changes because it really was the Titanic.
That would be great, except for the fact that they only did this 6 months after. It actually operated normally throughout this whole year.
And you can probably trace back
before and after the Titanic sank.
Yeah, you can probably trace back work orders and blueprints for all these retrofits and everything. Like you can back this up.
Yeah,
pretty substantially, right? It's not just looking at. Yeah, it's not. You can't use it as part of the fucking conspiracy.
One of the funny things too is when you first gave us this some info on this conspiracy theory, it pretty much starts off mostly or on most accounts with the mismatch of the number of portholes.
Yeah.
In the bow of the ship.
Right.
Like the 14 versus 16 portholes.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about all of this is that it goes back and forth because the Titanic had 16 portholes had at first 14 portholes put into it, and then they put a couple of extra portholes to allow some more light and air into some staff cabins or something like this, and a bathroom, I think. And the thing is, the Olympic had also started off with 14 and had been given 2 extra portholes, and somehow in the whole conspiracy, people find pictures of the ships with those 2 different numbers of portholes on them at different times.
Well, this
is somehow used as evidence that they put 2 extra holes into the Olympic to make it look like the Titanic. But the thing is, the Olympic had already had the.
She'd already gotten her upgrades.
She had already gotten the extra 2 holes there. So yeah,
it's just people are looking at photos from different periods of the ship's development, and they're well. See, there's a difference.
Yeah, there's a difference. Yeah.
Well, of course there's a difference.
They're
Because
two different ships.
Right.
But yeah.
So yeah, those are all the ones I had. The ones I stumbled on.
I think that's everything that I had noticed too in terms of the details there. Yeah.
So final thoughts on the various conspiracy theories surrounding the sinking of Titanic.
Well, I have no clue.
The one thing for me was that I found it remarkable that most of the compelling evidence.
There's compelling evidence?
No. What I mean by compelling is stuff that had people being convinced or persuaded that there might be something to it. Is that it mostly amounted to personal anecdotes from people. Like there's this one sailor guy who was a sailor around the time of the Titanic sinking, who was going around and on his deathbed he claimed this kind of conspiracy about the Titanic and the Olympic being switched and purposefully
I love
scuttled.
the deathbed
I
confession.
was just
type
gonna
stuff.
yeah, like I don't really.
Well, the Nessie guy did that, right? The guy
is-
that took that classic picture of Nessie on his deathbed was
Yeah.
like, you know what?
It's a
That was wood, and
Yeah.
it really wasn't very big, and
Yeah.
like it wasn't a big
Yeah.
deal at all, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And still that Nessie picture goes around.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy
Because
like,
people think, as part of the conspiracy, that his confession was fraudulent. Or
Yeah. They got to him.
They got to him. The men in black got to him, or whatever the monster equivalent
Yeah.
is.
So to me, what was remarkable was that what seemed to be convincing people who believe in it are these kind of personal anecdotes, like someone who was there said it.
well, it makes
Someone-
me curious
Whereas the evidence against the conspiracy and for the real life quote unquote narrative is that the evidence is actually like physical evidence.
Yeah.
like actual pieces of the hull of the Titanic. Like there's a giant piece that they did pull up from the Titanic wreck.
They call it the
that
big
has-
piece.
They call it the big piece, and it's got.
Did James
it's got
Cameron
some,
rescue it? He rescued it, James Cameron.
No, he wasn't
Oh, he
involved
wasn't
at that
involved.
point yet.
I saw the big piece in Vegas.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It's pretty big.
Well, the configuration of portholes that you see on that big piece actually is on the designs for the Titanic and not on the designs for the Olympic. So
How
that's
about
just
that?
another physical piece of evidence that it's the Titanic.
How about the actual plans? No one
Yeah.
ever mentions that, right? Like, fuck.
I suppose I'm curious as to why
I'm saying fuck a lot on this.
someone looks at something and goes, "I believe this,"
Yeah,
and that stops me from believing this other thing.
right.
Like, why does someone, conspiracy theorists,
Yeah.
let's say,
It's
why
be-
do they grasp that thing and hold on to it so tight and go, no, everything else is false, but this
It's because
this
of
is true.
It's that
It's
in-group
because of
thing.
tribalism and ego
Yeah.
and ideology, and people set themselves as being like some people and unlike some other people, or for some people and against some other people.
Right.
And so the confirmation bias sets in, and they just believe everything that supports their sort of prejudged notion of who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
They set up an inherent black and white fallacy with their beliefs, right? It's either this or it's not this.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have to be right, and no amount of evidence to the contrary will change my mind, and that's the confirmation bias thing that we were talking about, right? Like, it doesn't matter how many facts you throw at them, it doesn't matter how many pieces of evidence that you have to support the actual quote-unquote narrative. If you're not part of this in-group, if you're not part of my tribe, then you're the enemy, and
Right. I cannot register what you're saying because you are not like-minded in a sense.
They feel that they have, like I said in the introduction, that this secret knowledge that everyone else doesn't have, and that makes them special. That makes their tribe special. They're part of this one group that has like access to something that everybody else doesn't.
And the thing is, arguments and facts that contradict their intuition
Or attacks.
are considered sort of tricks to get them
Yeah.
to doubt what they know to be true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whereas vague kind of notions of coincidence or this is too convenient for the wrong people, that's more convincing because it confirms what you already hold to be true.
Yeah.
So if your measure of what's true is oh hey, I recognize that as matching what I already believe, so that's some good information there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Pile that on.
Yeah,
So
anybody,
that's why it's
Garbage
totally
pile.
linked to ego.
yeah, and anybody who says something to the contrary, someone who supports the actual historical, again, narrative in this case with the Titanic sinking, if you say something to that effect, that's exactly what someone would. That's exactly what they would say. That's exactly what they would have you believe, right? That's that pushback from the center of the ego that we're talking about. It's anything that would upset their worldview would be so shattering to their ego that they can't deal with it.
Well, and I think that is... we're playing that game as well. Even if the three of us are exactly bang on right. What I mean is that...
Of course, we are.
if we're exposed to...
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
exposed
everybody
to
has
something
an
that
ego.
psychologically
We all
destroys our world.
We're all subject to the
What
same
I'm saying is we
psychological
won't
heuristics.
be able to see it, you know? If we saw a UFO, we may not be able to grasp it. You know, if we saw something that broke our world, if we saw something that went against what we saw as logical, we were not able to register it. It would happen to us, is what I'm getting at. Even as smart as the three of us are, it would still warp our brains. Like, there are still things that we can't grasp.
Yeah, but I think the difference is a willingness to examine those preconceived notions and examine what's happening. If, for example, the UFO thing, if one were to land right now in the backyard, initial reaction would be, what the fuck, right? That I think we would all have that, what the fuck.
Yeah, what is that?
Yeah. And then comes the whole worldview shattering thing, and then comes, well, is it really world shattering?
But what I'm getting at
You know,
is
like,
that
it's
we
that
wouldn't
ability
even
to-
be able to... We could possibly even just not register it. It's like that story
if it's so alien to our experience.
of the
If there's
people
no
seeing
frame
the
of
ships
reference.
coming
There's no
in.
frame of reference.
If there's no
yeah.
frame of reference, we just
it
can't
might
even
just
process
be
it.
invisible to us,
Yeah.
like
The ships coming in when...
Right. Yeah, we've talked about that a couple
Yeah.
times.
like
Yeah,
things outside of the light spectrum that we actually see.
Yeah, we
you
just-
know, like
That's entirely possible. Like, we just wouldn't have the tools to
it's
grasp
like
it.
what's his name, Daniel Dennett's idea of the ants sort of living on a two-dimensional plane and not being able to register what's going on in the third dimension.
Yeah.
So you can just reach down from above and like plant a block or something in the middle of the ant's path, and to the ant that just appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah.
The flat world
Right.
example.
The
Right?
flat world example.
A three-dimensional object passing through that two-dimensional world would just see flashes of light, and they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't be able to see it because it just doesn't match that world or that perspective that they have.
I was being sarcastic, by the way, by saying we're super smart. You guys
I
picked
picked up on that. Yeah.
I wasn't going to say anything because I wanted to revel in the illusion for a while.
Unfortunately, I wasn't quite smart enough to get that.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
I have nothing smart to say. No.
So I guess
So Titanic 2, eh? Who's gonna book the?
I'm
the
totally
first
there.
trip on the Titanic 2?
I want to go down the same way Titanic 1 went down.
I find it ironic that I mean, sailing is one of those things that still has superstition and stuff attached to it,
Oh, yeah.
right? And so
In
I
what
find
sense?
it ironic that this is even being considered. You would think
Yeah.
that would be one of the last
Like,
worlds to
Changing the name of your ship is
sort
bad
of
luck.
tempt fate
No,
that
no,
way.
I feel like
In
it's
a-
on
in a
par
very-
with like let's go stay where serial killers stayed. Let's go on the serial killer trip, you know,
Well, see,
and check out all the
thing
things.
with Titanic 2 plays
We love the
directly into
darkness.
one of those seafaring superstitions. Like, you're not supposed to name your ship after one that sank. That's
Right.
one of the major predominantly available superstitions when it comes to sailing. You don't do that because it's bad luck.
Yeah.
You know, changing the name of your boat is bad luck. Not offering anything to Neptune when you cross the equator is bad luck. So what? I don't know. It's kind of funny.
Well, the concept of
Not
luck.
offering something to Neptune when you
there's
cross the equator?
Yeah, there's a tradition when you cross the equator that you're supposed to give an offering to King Neptune, so that.
Okay, when you cross it on the ocean.
Yeah. Like you can. It used to be on bigger ships they would have this whole thing where they'd act out an actual human sacrifice.
But if
to
you
King
cross
Neptune,
the equator on land,
then fuck it,
fuck it. You don't have
Yeah.
to.
because you're not on.
So if you just like.
If you're sailing across the equator, you're supposed to make an offering.
Okay.
It used to be they would.
So if you just like took a chaloupe down the west coast and you portaged in Ecuador
Then you're cool. Then you're good because you're not.
or Peru or whatever.
Because you didn't cross on his terrain or whatever. You're not on the
Okay.
ocean. You're on land now. So fuck it.
Okay.
But if you're sailing across the equator, you make an offering.
Okay.
There's something nice about traditions, but at the same
Yeah.
time, superstitions are something to rid the world of, I would think.
Yeah.
No? I mean,
Superstitions, yeah.
Crazy.
There's apparently something to be said for ritual, right?
right.
And
I like how you said, apparently it's a good thing. Apparently traditions are something we're supposed to like.
yeah.
Supposedly.
Supposedly. Yeah, but there, I think there is some value to, yeah, like you say, tradition and ritual and myth. You know, like I don't want to invoke JP here, but the idea of the beneficial myth and
Yeah, let's not go down that.
yeah. I guess there's better people to appeal to, like the idea, like the pagan Christ guy who's talking about the value of Christianity.
Let's go Joseph Campbell when we talk about myth.
Yeah, let's go right to the source.
Right to the source. Where was I going with that?
I don't know.
Okay, then never mind.
All right.
Fuck it.
I think my closing thought on the issue would be just there's no fucking reason to believe in these conspiracy theories. There's no substantive evidence to back it up. Just
Yeah, why are people even putting their minds there to think about these things?
Well, because they've already cast this rich guy J.P. Morgan as a villain, so
Oh, I see.
it's a story that tries to confirm their intuition that their ideological or whatever enemy is actually worthy of being an enemy.
yeah.
I'm going to blame Marvel in general for
Marvel.
building up the idea of, a villain and victim. And
Yeah,
all
but
that
Thanos
stuff.
did nothing wrong.
That's right. He's just trying to have a good time with his happy glove.
His happy glove.
His happy glove. Yeah.
Anyway, I think my closing thought would be vaccines are safe, the earth is round, the Titanic sank. That's
That's a good place to leave it off on.
so there you go.
It's succinct.
This has been Critical Junction episode 56. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
Yeah, as always, thanks for listening, and until next time, keep thinking critically.